pure political gangsterism from those running a party that is collapsing into a brutish authoritarian cult. That, at least, is how Trevor Phillips, the former chair of the Equality and Human Rights Commission, has reacted to receiving a letter informing him that he's been suspended from the Labour Party pending the investigation of allegations of Islamophobia. Trevor Phillips joins us in the studio. Morning to you.
Good morning, Nick.
Now, what have you been told? Because the Labour Party itself is saying very little about this.
Well, I received an 11-page letter, which I think must genuinely come from the Labour Party because it has my personal details, including my membership number in it. And though I am forbidden by the letter itself from quoting from the text, what I can tell you is that, because it's in the papers today, that I have been suspended with immediate effect, which I think is unusual, and because it is said the party's reputation needs to be protected, presumably against me.
Protected, yes. Let's be clear, you put it in the papers and the Labour Party are not disputing that this is really happening. So there's no dispute, I think, about the core facts here, that there are allegations that you have been Islamophobic. Now, in one sense, you can't be massively surprised about this, can you? Because you have picked a fight over many years with those people who want to limit the debate about the influence of Islam and indeed the attitudes of Muslims in a series of TV documentaries, in articles and things you've said and written, so you can't be entirely surprised that someone's taken you on, can you?
Well, I'm kind of surprised that what is and always has been an open and democratic party decides that its members cannot have a healthy debate about how we address differences of values and outlooks. And let's be clear about this. They say that I'm accusing Muslims of being different. Well, actually, that's true. The point is Muslims are different. And in many ways, I think that's admirable. I mean, there's a story this weekend in the papers about a cricket club in Yorkshire, which has turned down a £2 million lottery grant because its Muslim members say they don't want money which derives from gambling. Now, look, almost no cricket club would do that. But this group have a set of principles and they have stuck to it.
Sure.
They believe in what they believe. And my view is we need to recognise that and find a way, frankly, of getting the £2 million to those people in a way that they would accept.
But you know, I mean, you of all people know, it is sweeping generalisations which are the problem, and they are often the problem with racism. To declare Muslims are different, about 3 million people in this country, when you're talking about one cricket club in one town, is tricky. And there's other language that you've used in the past. When you made a famous Channel 4 documentary about what Muslims really think, you used the phrase, Britain's Muslims are becoming a nation within a nation. Now, that phrase, as you may know, was found in a letter from Tommy Robinson in the van of the man who drove into Muslims in a mosque in Finsbury Park. Do you not, at the very least, just need to be more careful about what you say and how it can be used by others?
Well, first of all, the so-called sweeping generalisation was made in a 20,000-word pamphlet which went into some detail about what I meant by different. But there are all sorts of differences in our society. And the central point of my pamphlet was to say we cannot continue simply to say that differences won't matter. And in my view, it's a form of disrespect somehow to say to people, oh, don't worry, the differences of values that they have, the beliefs that such and this group or that group have, including, by the way, the one that I come from myself, they'll get over it. That's disrespectful. We have to address them. Now,
sure, but does it make you flinch at all, the Tommy Robinson comparison?
To be honest, I had never heard that before.
Yeah.
I did not know he had ever used that phrase. But as my grandmother says, just because the devil picks up a tune doesn't mean it's a bad tune.
But there are lots of tunes for devils to pick up coming from the mouth of Trevor Phillips. I mean, after that documentary as well, The Times, a paper for which you're a columnist, and the quotes I gave today from your column in The Times, Muslims are not like us, race equality chief says. Now, you don't write the headlines. I understand you don't write the headlines, but you have quite an influence, if you want to, on a paper like The Times for which you write. It is the generalisations that lead people to say, isn't that what racism is? It's judging people not by their views, not by who they are, but by the fact they belong to a group.
You keep saying that I make these generalisations. Well, the truth is, if you do belong to a group, whether it is a church or a football club, You identify with a particular set of values, you identify with something, and you stand for it. And frankly, you are judged by that. Now, my point on this issue is that on a whole series of fronts, we're talking about Muslims. We might be talking about Rastafarians, let's say. They believe a particular thing, and the rest of the society has to recognise that, acknowledge it, and work with it.
But then the question is, given the debate in the Labour Party about anti-Semitism, in particular about the definition of anti-Semitism, which you and others were highly critical of, so critical you said that you couldn't vote for the party at the last election, having in the past been an active member of the party, aren't you guilty, some say, of hypocrisy? You felt passionately about the need to define anti-Semitism, to act against it, to crack down on it, and yet they say, here he is being very casual when it's another group.
Well, that's incorrect. I didn't introduce the definition of anti-Semitism myself. Actually, I've never been a particularly passionate supporter of this idea that you define things in that way. And I said that I would not vote for the party, not because of this, but because of the behaviour of the leadership and its failure to tackle anti-Semitism. On the question of the definition of Islamophobia, my objection to this is very simple. That definition says words to the effect that Islamophobia is a kind of racism, or rooted in kind of racism, expressions of hostility towards Muslimness. I have two problems with this.
Just to explain the background so that people know,
Yes.
This is not yet an internationally accepted definition in the way the one on anti-Semitism was. It's not been accepted by the government, but it has been adopted
By some
by
people.
the Labour Party, Liberal Democrats as well as it happens, and it was drawn up by an all-party group of MPs.
Correct. My objections to it, which were published in a pamphlet by the think tank Policy Exchange last year, are twofold. First of all, Muslims are not a race. I mean, my personal hero is Muhammad Ali. Before that, Malcolm X. They became Muslims largely because it's a pan-racial faith. This is not a racial grouping. So describing hostility to them as racial is nonsense. And the second point I made was that this idea of Muslimness, completely undefined, nobody knows what it means. And my point was, ironically, that what would happen is people who you couldn't imagine in any way being hostile would be swept up in some kind of persecution.
Now, it's clearly,
and here we are.
Clearly true that some people can choose, as it were, to become Muslim. White people can choose to be Muslim. People of all racial backgrounds and all origins can do that. However, many people are born to be Muslims. You know they are. They could leave, of course they could. People could renounce their faith. But they're essentially born. And the key to fighting racism is surely to say, we don't condemn you. We don't generalise about you because of the way you were born, the colour of your skin in your case, perhaps my racial background in my case, being Muslim in someone else's case. You just don't do it, and you are doing it, is the charge.
No, that's exactly the point I just made, Nick. Muslims are a multiracial grouping. In this country, actually, I think a majority are South Asian extraction, but actually there are large numbers of African Muslims. I myself, by the way, have 1,000 years of Islam Muslims in my history, interrupted by transatlantic slavery.
You wouldn't call yourself Muslim.
No, I wouldn't. But the point is that we are not talking about a racial group. We are talking about a group of people who are united by a faith and a belief.
So finally, if Labour does kick you out, and they've suspended you at the moment, not expelled you, you have no intention of moderating the way you talk about this issue. You intend to continue the fight as you see it.
Well, one of the things that I'm in fact now going to chair a meeting of the board of Index on Censorship. We are a global free expression charity, and frankly, it would be a bit odd if I suddenly decided that because I'd been kicked out of the club, I couldn't express my beliefs.
Trevor Phillips, thank you very much indeed. Labour aren't putting anybody up to talk about this, but a spokesperson did say the Labour Party takes all complaints about Islamophobia extremely seriously, and they're fully investigated in line with our rules and procedures.